Good morning, everybody, and welcome to CIO Yarn Live. And we've got a special guest, always a special guest. This is Mandy Simpson, who is the CDO of Z Energy. And this is May 6th, so this is our 5th edition of CIO Yarn Live. And just, of course, Mandy being a CDO, the title being CIO Yarn Live, you'll see somewhere in our points that we just use that as an easy title for all of them. You know that this is all about technology. And in fact, it's not quite all about technology because we talk a lot about culture. And the third point is lessons. But first of all, Mandy, if I could ask you to introduce yourself AFQY style. So give us a little bit about the person as well as about the work. And that's where we'll start before we get into our first big question, culture. So welcome aboard.
Thanks, Ryan, and kia ora koutou. It's fantastic to be here. As Ryan said, I'm Mandy Simpson. I'm the Chief Digital Officer at Z Energy. Z Energy, as Ryan's apparently going to call it today. So, but Z Energy for most of us. A little bit about me. You can maybe tell from the accent that I'm not actually from New Zealand. I'm originally from the UK. I've lived here for a little bit more than 15 years now, based in Wellington, really feeling at home as a Kiwi now. I'm from a tiny mining village up in the northeast of England, where my grandfather was a coal miner, coal mines that go out under the North Sea there. Brought up in Manchester and, as I said, moved over here 15 years ago. A little bit about me. I am... things that I do. I used to be a long distance runner, a marathon runner, and eventually my knees decided they'd had enough of that. So these days I do a lot of Kung Fu. In fact, I have grading for Kung Fu tomorrow that I'm a wee bit nervous about. Currently black tip, going for double black tip tomorrow. Live at home in Mangaraki, out in the Hutt Valley with my little beagle.
Wow, that sounds really cool. Let's start with the beagle. So how long have you had the beagle for? Is he old, young? So we looked at the beagle.
She is 4 years old, so not that long. I got her probably about a year before I joined here. And so it was quite good because I was doing a lot of consulting work. So we managed to spend quite a bit of time together rather than me being full-time in the office while the beagle was a pup. So she's reasonably well behaved as a result.
Yeah, well, we looked at getting a beagle and they're apparently super intelligent and really high activity. And we got a lab, and I got told by my wife, who's had 5 dogs, this is my first dog, oh, it'll be a puppy for 2 years and it'll settle down. Well, he's 6 and he's the highest brain activity they've seen at Berkeley Manor, and they've been open 10 years and have 200 dogs a day. So he's just like into everything. But looking at Kung Fu, really interesting space, right? So I'm into my CQC, close quarter combat, which is military martial arts. And they'll talk about it different to TMA, traditional martial arts. But I've always been fascinated because it's the discipline, it's the rigor, it's the going through. So to get to first black belt, how long did that take?
Yeah, so I mean, different for everybody, right? I have been training for 6.5 years now, and the earliest that I could become a black belt would be later this year. And so, currently at black tip. So not black belt yet. Yeah, so the earliest I could do it would be later this year. You have to be selected, right? So I have no idea whether that will happen. But that sort of time, like roughly 7 years, it seems to be kind of the time that people get there. And yeah, look, I agree. It's a fascinating area. I love the discipline of it. I love the kind of the meditative aspects of it. The particular school that I'm part of has this process of doing the same set of line drills every time that you go to class. So the first kind of 20 to 25 minutes is exactly the same, regardless of where you are in the country. There's schools all over the country. And that means that it's quite a meditative process. And yeah, I love it.
Well, that's something I didn't expect around the meditation side of it. And just coming to the Z or the Z, I don't know if it's a South Island, North Island thing, but yes, I grew up saying Z rather than Z, but I do get you with the Z. But the last thing, the one thing you haven't mentioned that, of course, everyone who knows me is not going to be surprised when I ask, about the rugby. Now, I know it was a few years ago, but you were a rugby player once upon a time.
Yes, I was. So I went to university at Cambridge in the UK and took up rugby there. I played football at school. And when I got to university, basically all the girls who played football also played rugby. And I was like, oh, okay, I'll give this a try. And turned out to be much better at rugby than I was at football, and ended up playing for Cambridge. And then when I went to London, played for Richmond Ladies as well before ending my rugby career with a torn ACL. So, yeah.
Oh, no. So when you say went to London and played for the club side, I take it that's quite a serious club in the women's competition?
Yeah, Richmond Ladies was at the time, a very serious participant in the women's leagues, and also, Cambridge University was playing at a pretty high level, and they got the big Blues match each year. It was pretty serious sport, right? I mean, obviously it's amateur and you're fitting it around work and all that sort of thing, and not the same as the guys who were professional, but yeah, taking it very seriously at the time.
Yeah, I could be inventing this, but I do have a memory because we used to work at Frond together many moons ago. And there was a photo of you, I'm pretty sure, in a pair of white rugby shorts and a green and white hooped jersey. Would that be correct? Or is that?
Yeah, that's right. Blue. It's blue. It's actually pale blue. So it's the Cambridge blue color. Yeah. But yes, there's a few of those photos flying around. I actually dug out of the archive just recently a black and white of, because I played hooker, right? So there's a black and white of.
You played hooker?
Yeah, I did.
I thought you were halfback for some reason.
I moved to halfback eventually, but I played my Blues match. I played hooker, and there's this great photo of the front line taken just as we were going down into the scrum, and I found that a black and white of that. So yeah, fascinating.
So I'm a grizzly old prop. I can't imagine having a punch up with you in the front row.
That would be different.
But let's not focus on the punch up in the front row, because what this is a beautiful bridge to our first question around culture, because we're just looking at diversity and inclusion. You've got the rainbow tick necklace on, lanyard. So there's lots of subjects here, and it's not just around diversity and inclusion, it's the wider culture question. So what I'd like to ask is, what do you see as important around culture, and what do you actively do to shape culture within your team?
Yeah.
If you could share that with us.
Yeah, so look, I've learned so much about this since being at Zed. It's something that I thought I did well previously, but Zed's just taken it to a whole new level. And that's because our chief exec, Mike Bennett, takes a really active interest in the culture of the organization, like very deliberate about what we describe here as culturing, as a verb rather than something that just happens. So Mike is very deliberate about the culture of the organization. In fact, he creates a document that is called the Our Why, and it says everything about Zed, why we exist, that sort of thing. He has written that document himself, every word of it, and it covers everything from our stands, like what do we stand for, our values, how we get work done at Zed. So the newest version, he rewrites it every couple of years, and the newest version talks about agile ways of working and all that. So everything that really matters about Zed. And anybody who comes to join us, we invite them to read that document as part of the interview process and talk to them about whether that is an environment they really feel that they could belong to and be part of. So it's a very deliberate process. And part of that is our kind of network. So this, of course, part of our Rainbow Network. So I'm the executive sponsor for Zed's Rainbow Network. And we're really deliberate, again, about our networks. So the Rainbow Network is the joint version of our Rainbow community and our Rainbow allies. And that creates the Rainbow Network. And we stand together on topics that are relevant to our Rainbow community. And we also have networks here for women, for Maori and Pacifica, and we're just kicking off a network around neurodiversity.
Oh, wow. Did you say Eurodiversity?
Neurodiversity. So, yeah.
I know. Let me make sense of that. That might have sounded a bit odd, but in 2020, I interviewed 37 Māori leaders for Te Wiki o Te Reo Māori about their journey with Te Reo, because I was not fed up, but I wanted to do something, because so many new Kiwis, mates, and that would say things, or even Kiwis would say things like, why learn Māori? Māori don't even learn Māori. Don't even. It's like, you don't know why though. So the idea was to share all those stories. And yes, it was amazing. A lot that came out was the empowerment that identity gave people. So especially learning their language, their culture, etc. And of course, my background is Irish-Swedish. So I started getting involved and going to an Irish event on Saturday for the first time in my life. So when you said, I thought you said Euro, I was like, yeah, I'm actually now looking into my ancestry myself as a result of learning from my experience with Māori and everything they learned from them. Because I've been learning Te Reo and starting to learn Irish Gaelic. But neurodiversity. So that's an amazing subject. So I don't know if you know, you probably will, down in Wellington, Kendra. Oh, last name's
Kendra Ross?
Yes. I was going to say Kendra Ross. I know so well. I've just had my Owen McCall moment where I completely forgot Owen's name one day right in front of everybody. But yeah, Kendra Ross, she's very big in the space. So is Dorinda Britton, and pushing that whole thing. And if I can just, my thought that I've chipped in, a thought I had was that it's actually an evolution of humankind. So we used to see it as a disability, a bad thing. But if we flip it the other way, it's evolution, and it's bringing diversity and something great and new and brilliant that should be harnessed. And so this is your show.
I think one of the great things about that is, we've just had 2 years of everyone working differently, and now really want to make sure that we hear the voices of our neurodiverse employees, to make sure that as we come back into the office or not, and as we look at what does flexible working mean for people, that we really pay attention to what they need and what everybody needs, rather than assuming that everybody can work the same as I can, or it's just listening to the people around us, really. And so enabling them to form their own network and place allies into that network who are really interested in that space and prepared to help and listen and be the voice in the room when there isn't somebody from that community in the room, is how we go about making sure that they're heard.
Wow, very cool. So if we just go back over all the different networks, there was the Rainbow Network, Women's Network, Northern Pacifica, and Neurodiverse. We've got that's the 4 key ones.
That's the ones that are in place now. And look, I think the neurodiversity one on its way. There are so many areas that we could cover in this space, and what we've done is we've chosen through our D&I process that is where we're starting. And there's so much to be done, right? There's so much to be done in this space. We have spent a lot of time working really hard in the gender diversity space, and yet there's still so much to be done. I feel so supported at ZED. One of the great things I tell people is I didn't realize until I arrived at ZED what a difference it makes to be part of a leadership team that has many women in it, rather than being the only woman on a leadership team, right? Where I have been in other organizations, including Frond, but also at NZX and others, where you end up having to be the voice of all of the women in the organization, right? You have to be the one who is out there speaking on issues that are relevant to women all the time. And I used to get really frustrated and say, I just want to talk about the work I'm doing and not have to be talking about what it's like to be a woman in tech and what it's like to be a woman in finance. And the great thing about being here with 3 other amazing women on our ZED leadership team is that we can share that. And so I don't have to be doing it all of the time.
So you get to share the load.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. And days like today, by the way, when, I don't know how much you've been following the press, but when we've been hearing about Nadia Lim being described as a little bit of Eurasian fluff and all of that. And it's really important to me that I can reach out to my peers in the lead team and know that, you know, there's other people there who are prepared to come out and comment about it. That our chair, who's a woman, Abby Foote, is prepared to come out and comment about things like that, where you're just like, goodness me, what is going on in this day and age for that sort of thing to still be in the press?
Well, the two comments I'll say is safety in numbers. And it sort of sounds negatively geared, but maybe it's more should be comfort and confidence in numbers, because when you've got more on the leadership team, then you get to share you'll get to share the load in some regards rather than being the only one. And coming back to this certain chap who can remain nameless and not get anything for it. But yes, there seems to be little bit of a every now and then some old white male pops up. Well, no, he's not actually that old, is he? But he is a white male, because it was the guy related to the rugby who came out with some pretty terrible remarks not too long ago. Don't know what's happening down there in Wellington, Mandy. You might have to go around and give them a good hooker's punch in the face. But yeah,
balance, Ryan.
the point you made is in this day and age.
How is this still going on?
If I could, sorry, just to interrupt. What I think is really good though is we're still seeing their true colours. Yeah. So it's better than them hiding in the shadows. They're getting bought out, and right now on Shortland Street. So people might mock me for watching Shortland Street, but it's actually a very good show. That's one of the things my wife and I do together. It used to be our post-work wind down, right? But they tackle a whole lot of, I guess, social problems. And at the moment, it's not around gender, but it is around racism and Māori. With one of the old doctors, a video coming out of him as a younger man mocking the haka in a drunken sort of video. And of course, it was, as the storyline goes, it was leaked as a bit of sabotage against him. But he's going through that whole thing of that's not who I am now. But yeah, this person obviously is like that now, and that's a bit terrible, really. So
yeah,
we'll all stand on the side. Well, I'm sure there was probably some other people in the shadows, but I think most people like myself and yourself will stand on the right side of that discussion quite firmly and vocally. So let's crack on to our next one, because that was a bit of a serious. Well, no, we shouldn't crack on if we need to cover anything more, because that's almost diminishing the support that I give to those situations. So apologies to anybody and everybody and yourself, Mandy. Yeah, that guy needs a good sorting out, and people need to understand it. So the benefit, I think, is that it brought it out into the light. It got everyone to see it.
Yeah. I think one of the interesting things for me is that I often hear, why do we still have to talk about gender diversity? Isn't it fixed? Isn't this already done now? And I guess, this is sort of the more extreme version of saying, no, it's not. But, there are lots of things that are still, we still need to work on. One of the great things I think about leading a technology team is, people often are like, oh, it's impossible to get good gender diversity in digital or technology teams. There's not enough women interested, and all of that sort of thing. And it's just not true, right? It's harder for sure, and you have to work really hard to make sure you are getting good diversity. But my leadership team, my digital leadership team of 8, is now 5 women and 3 men, and that enables us in lots of different ways to bring more diversity into the team, because women look before they leap. They look and they're like, what am I jumping into here? And when you're starting to see an organization that represents you well, you are much more likely to join it.
Yeah. So here's a question for you related to this. Do you have stats on, maybe it's, I don't know, obviously potentially your app can measure it or your app doesn't measure it, but who is the biggest buyer of petrol, men or women?
I do not think our app measures that. In fact, I don't think we carry that data at all on our customer base. I would have to check to be sure, but we don't. We fall into the category of believing that unless you need to know gender, you shouldn't store that data. And so I'm not certain that we would be able to. And certainly, it's not something that we use in that way.
And I was thinking around things like you want your board, your team, etc., to represent your customer base.
Yes.
And that's where I was going. That's where the angle of that was. Because,
well, certainly our customer base is a very diverse one, right? Like it's the whole country.
Well, I was thinking back to when I was a kid, and your mum would coach the sport and also pick us all up, and we'd drive around and pick up 10 kids, right?
Yeah.
So probably wouldn't be allowed to do that today, but I used to be the one that had to go in the boot of the station wagon for the other kids to sit. But yeah, so mum was always the one that
would be allowed to do that.
And through all my advertising career, it's usually the woman who's in control of the household spend, which petrol will come under. Therefore, having 5 to 3 on your digital team, representative of your customer base, was the short part where I'm trying to get to. But that's pretty amazing. The one thing I wanted to ask you is that whole discussion around getting more diverse mix in tech, and from women to Māori and Pacifica, and that whole discussion of they're not interested. And I think there's a really big reason why they're not interested, and it's coming back to the very beginning. And I learned this year, this has been around for a couple of years, but it's called the dream gap. Have you heard of that? Where from about the age of 5, young women are already starting to notice that the women are not doing the things in certain roles, and therefore they have a dream of maybe being, I don't know, an astronaut, but they don't see any woman doing it, so they start moving off to something else. I.e., I won't go down STEM, I won't go down tech because that's just a dream. It's never going to be right for me. I will focus more on this, which is in my space. So it's almost like, I don't know if it's subconscious, but it's almost redirecting them on their radar of where they want to go.
That's why it's so important for those of us who are in the space to remain visible, talk to people, and just be out there, making sure that the people who want to come and work in this area can and do.
Cool. Well, thank you so much for that, all those aspects of culture. We're going to move on to the tech question, because we are in tech, and this is what gets people excited in many ways. So could we look at what are the cool things, big things, different things that you're able to share that you're doing at Z Energy in the digital space?
Lots of people will know that Z Energy is about to be taken over. So we're being taken over by Ampol, which is a fuel retailer in Australia. So very similar company to Z. Fuel retailer without one of the things about Z is we don't do the kind of drilling for oil or any of that sort of thing that you might see from the international oil majors. We are a petrol and diesel retailer. And Ampol is very similar to us, but based in Australia. That takeover goes through on Tuesday of next week, and I have been working on that for almost a year now, so very excited to see that actually happening. And so a little bit of the work that we're doing is in integration between the two companies. Not a huge amount. We're doing what we described as light touch integration, but you still got to start to bring some things together that enable the organizations to collaborate. So there's some stuff happening in that space, but mostly we're just staying really focused on New Zealand. And one of the biggest things that has been happening for us is just a simplification of our systems. It is really difficult to be nimble. We want to be nimble and agile and able to move quickly as the market changes. And it's really hard to do that when you've got this enormous proliferation of legacy systems. So we started with 120 systems that we were working on. We're down to 80. We're aiming at 50. So that work is ongoing. And that's really interesting, detailed integration work, right? For people who work in this space, there's some really big and interesting projects underway there. We will be 100% cloud-based by the end of this financial year. We're almost there already. So we're making really good progress in this space. And that's been a lot of very hard work. So it's only this time last year that we were exiting our last lines of COBOL, right? So there's still work to be done, but we're almost 100% in the cloud now.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And then the other big things for us, I don't know how much your audience is aware of this, but we're going through a once in a generation change in the way that the hydrocarbon industry works in New Zealand. So the refinery up at Marsden Point was closed as a refinery at the start of April. And we have become an import-only industry. So we no longer refine our own product in New Zealand. Instead, anyone who wants to sell petrol or diesel in New Zealand or jet fuel is importing that either themselves or through Marsden Point. And that changes everything about what we need to do, in terms of, instead of bringing in large shipments of crude oil, we're now, bringing in individual shipments of petrol and diesel, etc. And so we are building forecasting systems and scheduling systems and all that sort of thing to support that change. And that has really interesting parts to it. So, utilizing artificial intelligence to forecast demand for fuel across our entire network. And that in the space of COVID, right, when everything's changed about where we work and how people drive and where they're going and where people go on holiday and all of that sort of thing, has been fascinating in itself. Like, what can we draw from that data? How relevant is the data from 2 years ago? What will it look like going forward? We are definitely keeping our data. We have a really good data and analytics team here at Z. That team has grown from being like 3 people when I joined to I think there's 17 of them now, with some really serious data engineering and data scientists in that team. And so really looking at that sort of work. And then the final thing is, the bit that everybody sees, the app, and the changes that we're making in how you buy petrol. So yes. That's gone from the enabling people to get in and out of the sites really fast, our pay-by-plate option, which now means that you can just drive in, it will recognize who you are, it pops your name up on the screen, you just fill up and go. And then, so there's partly that, and then ShareTank, which is our world-leading method of buying petrol on your phone. So you can buy at the cheapest rate within 30 kilometers of where you are, and then spend it at any of our service stations. And then things like Carbon Count that enable you to offset your carbon emissions as you buy your petrol. Yeah. So lots still to happen in that space. We are moving into, of course, selling electricity. You can buy electricity now through Z Electric, and starting to put our own branded chargers onto sites. And so all of that also needs to be wrapped up in the back end of the app and that sort of thing. So heaps still to do. Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know if I can ask this or if you can answer this, but has the stopping of Marsden Point refinery been responsible for the increase in the prices?
No, not at all. So the change in price is very much driven by the price of oil internationally.
Yeah.
And
that's every petrol station, not just Z, of course. So
that's right.
It's not just you guys.
That's right. And everybody is impacted in the same way by that. But the price of oil internationally has changed for many reasons. But one of those, of course, is the conflict between Russia and the Ukraine.
Oh yeah, of course. So many things going on in the world, and that's another subject. Various companies have got teams working there. So very sad, and I just hope that doesn't become World War III. And this might sound terrible, but I just think the simple answer is someone's got to take Putin out directly, send the SAS with a sniper rifle in there and sort that guy out, and we can all move on. But that's not today's discussion. So let me bring it back to today's discussion, because the ShareTank I thought was brilliant, because people drive to go and find the cheapest petrol, and they had a website at one point saying who had it. So how far are people driving, wasting petrol to get the cheapest petrol, and then driving back to their area and where they live?
It's crazy, right? And all of that is carbon emissions that we do not want to be happening, right? So Z is you may or may not have just seen our recent brand campaign, but that campaign moving with the times across all of our different areas of TV, radio, billboards, etc. But sitting underneath that is the statement that we're in the business of getting out of the petrol business. And so the low carbon future of all of us is something that we're really committed to, and supporting our customers as they go through that process. we will support our customers to be able to transport themselves and their goods around New Zealand through this process. But we don't want people to be driving around for no reason. That's carbon emissions that nobody needs. And so being able to use something like ShareTank to help people to buy their petrol without having to go through that process is amazing.
And that is so bold. Like, I just want to say, I love it. Such a great campaign. It's the sort of thing, like, I used to work in advertising, and I would put, this might sound a bit silly of myself to say, but I used to put crazy ideas out there like that, and the super serious board people would go, oh, no, we're still making a lot of money from petrol. We will still sell a lot of petrol. We've got to maximize the profit out of petrol. But Z Energy's gone and done it. We're in the business.
Yeah, and look, completely with the support of our board, right? And Mike, our chief exec. So Mike is the leader, convener of the Climate Leaders Coalition. And, we are 100% committed to being, moving from being like the part of the problem here to being right at the heart of the solution.
Yeah. And hey, look, let's be frank. If we label it as being part of the problem, it's the way life has been and the way life is. And like anything, we all used to smoke. Well, not everyone used to smoke, but a lot of people used to smoke. I used to smoke. In fact, when my mum was a kid, her dad told her that she had to because it was the dumb thing to do. Look at what we say about smoking today. So we live, we change, we learn, etc., and that's cool. Hey, we're just a little bit over time. Just want to check you're okay for another couple of minutes.
Yep.
Because I did want to ask a little bit more about the electricity and hydrogen, because hydrogen has just I've been watching that along, but it has just hit the news in a big way. So is it that we're looking for electricity and hydrogen future, or will it be one over the other? There's different, I don't know a lot about hydrogen, but the electricity side, it takes quite a lot of generation. So imagine if with all the different devices, iPads, Xbox, all the rest of it chewing up electricity, now add on every car becomes electric. Are there any stats and ideas around how much electricity is going to be required to be created for that versus, say, hydrogen, which is out of water, if I'm not wrong?
Yes, although created normally via electricity to electrolyze that water. But I think there's a couple of really interesting things to pick up on there. Firstly, one of the reasons that hydrogen has been so in the news this week is the hydrogen conference that was on at Te Papa this week. So Z was represented there. It is obviously something that we're looking at very closely. Your comment on the use of electricity. One of the interesting things about using electricity for transport, if we think about that particular use of it, is that it can and does use electricity in a sort of different way, as in, you don't have everybody filling up their cars at exactly the same time. People do go home, they will plug it in. Increasingly, we're seeing cars that can do vehicle to grid as well. So, if the grid needs or your house needs to use electricity, you can pull that electricity from this very large battery that's stored in your car. So there's lots of opportunities around smoothing the use of electricity there, because the interesting thing about electricity is not the total use, but the peak use. So like, what does our peak load look like? And so how can we smooth that by the use of battery technology is one thing there. And I think hydrogen has an interesting role to play in there too. So one of the things you can do is you can take electricity at a time when it's not at peak use and use it to create hydrogen, and then use that hydrogen at a later time. I don't want to predict the future here. In the transport space, I think, it's potential that both will have a use, potentially electricity for the shorter and lighter vehicle fleet, and hydrogen for the longer, heavier vehicle fleet. But the biggest thing, the most important thing here, I think, is that even if one of them is going to win, we don't have time to wait and find out what that is and be like 10 years down the track and go, oh, we need hydrogen as well, right? It's too late by then. So we need to be thinking about all of these options now and be trying all of them now, so that whichever one the answer is, we're there when we still have a chance of keeping the world to 1.5 or 2 degrees of warming, and not, accelerating way beyond that. So I'm a huge fan of trying everything we've got. Let's throw everything we've got at the problem.
Absolutely. Now, on that note, problems. last question is lessons. So we look at this as a kind of a mentoring type opportunity where you've got the opportunity to share one of your lessons from your experience and years in the industry, so that it might even be someone who's older than ourselves. But the original aim was that it was for young people coming through. It's a lesson that an experienced talks can share.
Yeah.
So with that, would you be able to share the lesson that you'd like to pass on to everybody today?
Yeah, so the one thing that I really wish I'd known earlier in my career, I spent probably the first 10 to 15 years of my career worrying and wondering about, what was I going to do next? Like, how was I going to progress? What did the next job look like? And that's really encouraged by the way that we talk to people. You must have an individual development plan, and what's your next career step, and all of that kind of thing. I found it incredibly stressful. Because I didn't know. I was a chartered accountant. I have a law degree to start with. Then I was a chartered accountant, and I just couldn't see a career path for me there. And so I kept feeling like I was failing in that space. And I talked to lots of people like, how can I possibly know what I'm supposed to be doing? And like, I don't know what I want, in the long term. And people get so stressed about it. And what I've realized over time is that if I stayed focused on developing a really broad set of skills, and I stayed focused on what were the things that I enjoyed doing, that the opportunities appear, right? And so now I'm like really focused on being ready for opportunities. Frond is a really good example of this, right? So when I arrived at Frond, I was the chief financial officer there, and I realized that if I was going to continue in these executive roles, I needed to get better at public speaking and better at communicating in general. And so I spent a lot of time really focused on that. And that's something, I think there are particular sets of skills around teamwork, around communication, and those types of things that are useful for everybody. And so I'm like, really get people focused on that, and then how they can take that across wherever their career leads them, rather than worrying about what is the role that they really want to do.
Yeah. Well, that's really good advice. I wish I had that back when I was at school, right? So just a bit of context, I was in the top class and did pretty well for myself. During class, I was a little fat geek, and out of school, I was a pretty psycho front row rugby player. So I lived in the two different worlds in some regards. But I kept on getting told, you have to do maths and science because you're too smart to not. And I hated it. I loved art. I used to do art. As a 6-year-old, I drew a replica of a painting in the museum, and it became big news in Dunedin, not a big place. But I really loved my art, but I wasn't allowed to do art because that's where all the bad boys went to smoke dope out the back of school. So after trying university and not becoming a doctor, not becoming a lawyer, not becoming an architect, and getting a job as an art director, winning 7 awards, including being part of the team that did the only work for the All Blacks outside of Saatchi's and Saatchi's, I sort of came to this little conclusion that you've got to follow your own path. And I'll say not God's, because that's the traditional sort of, follow God's path, but not God's path, not your principal's path, not your teacher's path, not your parents' path, because they'll all tell you what they think you should do, what they think is going to be best for you. But in actual fact, if you follow your passion, then everything else will fall into line, because you will put in the effort to learn, you will put in the effort to explore, you will find opportunities, they'll come your way. And typically when people are just like in their zone and their flow and doing really well, then people go, oh, we want you to do that stuff. So you do, your opportunities just keep on going ding, 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 ding. For you, law accounting, and it went ding, 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 and here you are now as CDO. Because there's so much choice out there. That was the other thing. There's so much choice even then. Now is probably 10 times the amount. So I can't imagine what it's like to be a high school kid trying to go, what do I do? Really, really good advice. I think follow your passions, collect your skills, and let the opportunities take you to the next part of your career. Yeah. So we both fell into silence there. Sorry. I'll say that was it. Was that a good summary of what you?
Definitely. Look, I think, and the comment on kids, I think, is really particularly relevant, because I hate seeing, these kids get so stressed about what am I going to do at university, and like it's somehow going to define their entire lives. And one of the things I love to say to people is, I have a law degree, I have never used it. Right? Of course, I use what I learned there all the time. I use the skill sets that I learned. But just because you do one thing at university doesn't mean you have to do it forever. And talking to people who work in my leadership team or elsewhere in the digital team at Z about the fact that what they do now doesn't define their lives is really, you can be changing what you're doing in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 40s, in your 50s. There's absolutely no barriers now to people learning something new and getting on with it.
Yeah. So I'm going to put in the quote, and it's your quote, is that your degree doesn't define your career. And on that note, I used to say to young people, because I don't have a finished degree, I went and tried twice, but just after leaving high school and leaving all that swatty heavy time, I was just like, no, I'm not doing it again. I never quite got there. But what I would say to them is that a degree is simply a driver's license. You can drive any car with your driver's license, but what it shows is that you've applied yourself and done that. But the interesting thing is now, of course, with the global skill shortage, especially in IT, organizations like Mission Ready and a few others are putting out 3-month vocational courses that are training people. So rather than 3 years, you can be out there in 3 months. Yeah. And that means that you can retrain in 3 months, which gives you that opportunity if you're like, actually, I've done this for 3 to 4 years and I'm really enjoying it, but I do like the look of that. With 3 months, you can change. So great opportunity. Look, I'm going to just summarize and give you a moment to collect thoughts for closing remarks. So just want to thank you, Mandy, for all your time today sharing. We have our 3 big questions around culture, and you shared around how CEO Mike is very deliberate and rewrites the why pack for Z Energy. That you have a range of networks that you support from Rainbow, Māori and Pacifica, Women, and the new one is neurodiversity. The other elements are that the leadership team have a 4 women on it rather than just the one. So rather than always being the only woman talking about women's matters and gender equity, you're able to share that load and also talk about other matters around business. And of course, your digital team is the other way. It's 5 women and 3 men. So it's a great example, especially in the industry being something like 75, 80% male, or it was. So we're starting to move that needle and starting to see it, because when we see it, then more people will follow it, and it'll make that role and that idea attractive to a young, say, 5-year-old, where the dream gap has been recognised, that young people are seeing from the age of 5 that there's no future for them in a certain area. So now you're showing that there is a space for women with 5 on your leadership team, which is excellent. And of course, the tech, so the big buyout by Ampol, the Australian version of Z, and the simplification from 120 to 80 with an aim of 50 systems. Actually, Roxanne Sultan touched on the very subject in a different way in the last session. And the lesson, so your degree doesn't define your future. Beautiful. Beautiful. So with that, your closing remarks you'd like to share with everyone as we end today's session.
Yeah, well, I actually just wanted to end with a thank you to you, because both this and also the wider work that you do with AFQY. Networking is super important in technology, and it's often done badly, like really badly, and being able to bring together people to have discussion about people first is super important to me. And I know you've been a big supporter of women in tech for a long time, and I'm really, really grateful for your continued support of all forms of diversity throughout our areas. One of the great things about working at Z is that almost nobody knew that we had a digital team when I started, and so things like this, where I can come and talk about what we're doing, is fantastic for us. And with so much exciting work done, and so much exciting work still to be done. A lot of people talk to me about, how can you go and work for a petrol company when you're so passionate about climate change and making a difference in that space? I believe that being right at the heart of this is how you make a change, right? This is where the difference gets made. If you have companies like Z and BP and Mobil and others against you, like, you can't make the change. You have to be right at the heart and bring these companies with you. So that's what we're trying to do here, and really grateful for the opportunity today to talk about it. Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, and thank you for the reminder around networking. I've got some material coming out on that, provide training, but I've decided that I'm going to start releasing a range of videos to help people so that they can watch them before they come to an AFQY event. And of course, one in Wellington on the 26th. And I know that you'll be out of Wellington, unfortunately, but hopefully we'll see a few Z Energy of the 130 digital teams on a 5%, that's going to be around 6 or 7 people, hopefully. No pressure, Mandy. But thank you so much for everything you've shared today. Some really salient points, some great insights and lessons. So with that, we will wrap up and let you get back to your busy day, because you're in the business of not selling petrol.
That's right. You're in the business of getting out of the petrol business.
You're in the business of getting out of the petrol business. Yeah. There you go. I love that. Such a bold campaign. So great thanks to you, and ka kite iano to everybody out there. We'll sign off at this point. And I just wanted to say one last thing, because I haven't said it once the whole show. I've got to say thanks to Neil Calvert from LINQ, our sponsor. So he's sponsoring CIO YARN Live for the whole month, so through the 4 shows. And of course, without sponsorship, I would be doing something else and we wouldn't be here. So thank you very much to LINQ and Neil Calvert. And of course, last thanks to you, Mandy. Again, great session. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Ryan.